Good evening and welcome to episode 373 of the Gersnet Podcast. I'm your host tonight, John McCallum. Gersnet is the independent Rangers podcast made for fans by fans where the content is free. It's not just a podcast we have in Gersnet, there is a forum, we have articles, social media, there's a great history archive. And we would encourage you to subscribe to the pod if you enjoy it. You look on YouTube for us, we're on other platforms which I'll tell you about at the end, but if you subscribe for us on YouTube then you won't miss any. Now, before we start dissecting today's developments, I need to mention our sponsors who very kindly put some money Frankie's way to help this all happen. So Forrest Precision Engineering are our main sponsors, and they are a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company and have been a big commercial sponsor of Rangers for many, many years, and we are delighted that they're backing our podcast again this year. And you can find out more about them at forrestprecisioneng.com. And you can also visit the Forrest Precision Executive Lounge, just stunning hospitality area within the main stand. And for information how to book that, you can contact the club directly at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Now, it's been an interesting few days to be a Rangers fan, from the highs of Thursday and the buzz, which frankly stayed with me until probably yesterday evening, to the utter lows of today. They find new ways to punish you. So anyway, I'm joined with Ross tonight, and we'll look into how you don't score when you have a 4-on-1. How hard is it to really take a penalty, and just what is the point of VAR in Scottish football? Ross, I'm not even going to ask how you are, because I suspect we're feeling the same way. Anyway, it is good of you to give up your Sunday night and join us to I don't know, is it a wake? What are we doing tonight? What's this working?
Well, do you know, you said at the top, what's this, episode's 353?
373.
373.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to estimate that at least 330 of those have been me on this show after an Old Firm defeat. And so I'm getting pretty good at it. So, look, as I said, it's kind of...
Ross, do you think maybe you're a jinx? I think you're the problem.
I'm the problem. As I said, kind of before we went live there, I felt better. I have certainly felt better on nights like this. I have also felt worse. So, I know we'll try and pick through the bones of it, and we'll try and see silver linings and whatnot. There have been some really, really dark days over the past, well, you could say past 18 months, you could say past 5 years, you could say past 10 years. This isn't one of the darkest. It's certainly not one of the brightest as we watch them lift another trophy. But it's not the worst. And I feel I'm going to force myself to feel, because I know in a few days' time I will feel it. So I'm going to force myself to feel it a few days earlier than I should do. I'm going to force myself to feel some optimism and some positivity. And I am happy to play the role of the annoying guy looking for positives on a night like tonight.
Well, good, because I'm not supplying very many tonight the way I'm feeling. Look, let's... There really is only one topic to talk about. The starting lineup. There's Clement usually throws us when he start lineup. There's usually a player or two in there that none of us are expecting, but that wasn't really the case today. A couple of changes. Obviously, Suter not starting, and Suter's probably not won over all of our support, but he's been our best defender this season, I think, and for me a loss. Having missing. You saw when he went off on Thursday that he was clearly going to be out for a wee while. So him not starting today was no surprise to anybody. But a definite loss. Balogun comes in, and Proper, who is another player I don't think has won over the support as yet. Although, without preempting things, I actually thought he had a very good game today. I thought he had a very good game on Thursday as well. So maybe he's finding his feet and starting to become the player that we'd hoped we'd signed. But when you saw the lineup, what was your feelings initially, Ross? Without the power of hindsight, what did you think?
Yeah, I actually thought it was a very traditional Philippe Clement starting 11, there were two question marks about the lineup today before we saw it. One was who plays at right back. I think that was the one that was probably discussed the most in advance. Who plays at right back? Because 3 weeks ago that answer was Dujon Sterling.
Yeah.
And then Tavernier had a good 3 weeks. Actually, I wasn't surprised to see him in the starting lineup. I kind of predicted it, but it was definitely a question mark, and everyone immediately is starting to worry about Daizan Maeda and the number of times we've seen him caught out in that position before, which didn't actually happen today. In my
opinion, a great game.
I thought he had a really good game.
Yeah.
One or two questionable moments, but he had a good game. The other one for me was I expected to see Danilo start.
Yeah.
After not seeing him midweek, obviously with the Europa League squad, he's not in it. I was surprised to see Bayrami, so I kind of expected Danilo to be in place of Bayrami and to have that fluidity across the front three again, which we've seen quite a lot in the league in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I was a little surprised at that, and I was a little disappointed at that because I don't think Bayrami's been performing overly well the last 6 weeks or so. However, he shut me up quite nicely by opening the scoring. So not a massive shock in the lineup, but and actually I have to say I think he got it right. I think he got the shape right. I think he got the tactics right. When the game started, it looked to me like we were kind of just repeatedly going long ball, long ball, long ball. And I've long been a proponent on this show and elsewhere of saying their defenders aren't that good. Get the ball down and run at them and scare them and put them under pressure. Again, that shows why I'm not the manager, because the long ball today unnerved them and unsettled them at the back. And the number of times that, sure, their defender would win the first contact on the long ball, but we were there for the second ball. Yeah. It was clearly the plan. It was clearly what had been worked on, and it was working. That was gaining us territory up the pitch. So actually, I was pretty pleased with how Clement set up today with the personnel he chose. As I say, the two question marks: Tavernier, who had a good game, and Bayrami, who scored. He got it right for me.
Yeah, I think the other one that's maybe raised an eyebrow was Hadji starting.
Yeah.
Now, again, like Danilo, not available through the week, so fresh legs. He's come back into the team after a period out. He's done okay. I'm not Hadji's biggest fan. Anybody who spends any time with me knows that. In every team you've got a player. You used to have it with Scott Arfield. Every team has got a player that you just never take to. Well, Hadji's mine. I just feel always he flatters to deceive and he doesn't work hard enough. And anyway, but I was kind of prepared for him coming into the team. Like you, I thought him and Danilo would start. I thought they would both come in and I thought they would both start. And having watched Tav on Thursday night, I thought, no, he'll start. If he's fit, he'll start, because he had such a good game on Thursday night. I thought he'll start. And I'm actually delighted that he had a good game and delighted he stepped up and took his penalty and scored it. That will have done him no end of good, and I actually feel a wee bit bad that we were as impatient with him a few months ago as we were. He's been a fantastic servant to the club. And he gets criticised, and often rightly. There are things that you could level, but one thing he never does is hide, and one thing he does is turn up when asked. So I was actually very pleased with his performance today. You touched upon the tactics. That diagonal to Igamani was definitely one of our tactics. Pressing them to try and create mistakes was again something you felt that's deliberate. I don't think that was just. I haven't seen us play that against Celtic before. Certainly the game earlier this season, Celtic just passed their way through us. They didn't do that much today. There's a spell in extra time when they were doing it, but we were dead on our feet. But in normal time, that didn't happen too often. We were pressing them into mistakes, and our transitions, I think, is the term we use. When we did win the ball, we were fast, sometimes too fast. Sometimes the ball, we were trying to play the first time pass when really we shouldn't have been. We would often give up possession a little bit cheaply, I felt. But that did seem to be our tactics, and a change in tactics against Celtic. So, I mean, I've heard folk complain about Clement and say, you know what, it's not working, he has to change things. Well, he changed things today. That was definitely a different style of play against Celtic, and for the most part, it worked. Was there anything tactically that you picked up on, or anything in there that you feel, worthy of note?
Yeah, there were a couple of interesting things, and to pick up on what you said there about us breaking with pace and being aggressive and sometimes going too quickly. I texted a mate of mine during the game to say, and I sort of don't mind admitting this, I think in a lot of areas Celtic have better players than us, particularly when it comes to squad depth.
Yeah,
they're slightly better on the ball than us. Yeah, better bench. But what we were doing today was we were sort of a bit chaotic and a bit wild with it. And it was almost like having a team of Alfredo Morelos's, of just going, or not Morelos, a team of Fashion Sakalas. You go, I don't quite know what he's going to do, but something might come of it. And it really, in midfield in Old Firms in recent years, completely dominated in the midfield. Today we weren't. And I agree with you, 110 minutes to 120 minutes, we probably were. But that's the 48 hours of rest that they had that we didn't have.
Yeah.
And I'll say this now, and I've got no basis on which to say it. If we played on Tuesday and they'd played on Thursday, we win today. I really, really believe that. However, if you look at, say, the first 110 minutes of that game, we were so tight in the midfield. We were touch tight on McGregor for the whole thing. We marked him out of the game, certainly for the sort of the regulation 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was really, really noticeable that they weren't able to pass their way through the midfield. Now, there were a few occasions, 4 or 5 occasions, in which the midfielder, say, had his kind of back towards the Rangers goal and had a Rangers midfielder behind him. There were 2 or 3 times or 4 or 5 times where that Celtic player managed to turn and managed to get away and break through. And what that did is that exposed, in my opinion, a bit too much space between our midfield and our defence, and they had space to break into, and that was quite a nervy a nervy passage of play whenever that happened, and it did happen a few times. But it was so markedly different to what we've seen in previous Old Firm games. There was a comment on Premier Sports from one of the co-commentators who basically said it was around 35 minutes, said it's so clear that Rangers players have been asked to mark Callum McGregor out of the game. Just make sure that Callum McGregor is really hassled and doesn't have any space. And it was at that moment that I realised Callum McGregor was on the pitch.
Yeah.
Because we had completely nullified him. Yeah. So actually, again, tactically speaking, the long balls to try and win the second ball, the pace and the aggression and the chaotic nature when we do get the ball, and the touch-tight marking in midfield, how we needed to play the game. And I was, I feel for whatever reason, we had a 10 to 15 minute wobbly period when they scored their 2 goals. I don't know why, but it was kind of, it was individual mistakes rather than tactical systems for me.
I think the wobble came, I think Jeffy was done. I think Jeffy should have been taken off 5 minutes before he was. It was a couple of times you saw he nearly get caught and suddenly they were exposing our left-hand side. And I think Hadji, I don't think Hadji's good enough to play there in those types of games.
Can I ask, John, do you feel that even since he's come back from his sort of extended absence?
I've always felt that about Hadji. I just think he's one of these players that flatters to deceive. I think he's one of these guys who clearly has ability, but that more often than not it doesn't come to anything. He's a number of times he plays a pass to nobody. He worked hard today. He's from my dad phoned me earlier. Dad phoned me after 9 minutes. He said Hadji's working hard. I was like, I wish he'd been taken off at half time. So you have to try and get over your own personal prejudices, because I did think that we didn't have too many failures today, but I just felt at that period in the second half they suddenly were exposing our left hand side, and part of that I think was fatigue with Jeffy. But if that is the case, then your player who shouldn't have any fatigue has to be covering better, has to be doing more on that to cover for him, and I didn't feel he was at that point. But perhaps if I watched it back, I'm not going to watch it back, but perhaps if I did, I might feel differently. You do see the game differently second time round. Yeah. Anyway, look, tactics, I think, were largely working. And as we said, that kind of snapping in, trying to get them to make a mistake, led to the first goal. And it's funny, I texted my cousin, I think, that I just felt we hadn't been getting the ball to Igamani properly, because Igamani, there's a touch of the Sakalas about him to keep that theme going. You're never entirely sure he's going to do something with it. And he's obviously become quite an important player over the last, few weeks, really. But we hadn't really been getting the ball to his feet a great deal. He hadn't had a chance to run at them much before that. And then all of a sudden, we win possession. I think it was Bajami who won possession? Certainly him that broke. Played it into Egamani, who actually, and it's been overlooked, actually did really well, because there was two players around him and he managed to kind of beat one of them and get a decent shot off, which was well saved for Bajami to come in and stick away. And you couldn't say we didn't deserve it. It was a bit like the Spurs game. We had worked hard enough to deserve a goal. I felt, I was utterly ecstatic at that point, because you thought, okay, this is different. This isn't how it's been. What was your view of the goal? What's your memories of it?
Yeah, similar to yours. I actually feel, on the whole, that Igamani had a poor game. I think he made some baffling decisions at times, some selfish decisions, and I think he looked really tired after midweek.
I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did.
I am too, yeah. And I think if we had better options on the bench, he wouldn't have done.
Well, it's interesting because it looked like Dessers and Danilo were coming on, and then we scored the second. Yeah. And then we didn't change it. Well, I know Danilo come on, obviously, but then we didn't make that change, which did surprise me a little.
Yeah, no, I agree. But like you, I'm surprised at how long Igamani lasted, and I think it was a poor game compared to what we've seen over the last. He scored 5 in his last 5, hasn't he? The goal itself, though, he did really well, and he did really well after I thought he'd kind of completely arsed it up. I thought he'd made a total mess of it, and that the moment had gone. But he does then kind of do well to dig a shot out on target. Could their keeper have done better to get it, not coming back into a dangerous area, possibly, but good following in from Bayrami.
Aye.
A well-worked goal, strong, good, aggressive, running with the ball. It's what we want to see. Bayrami comes in, knocks in the rebound, nice and easy. I was convinced he was offside, because that's how our luck seems to go against Celtic at the moment. But it did feel different. It felt, actually, am I right in saying that, Philippe Clement has a habit of going 2-0 down against Celtic, like repeatedly going 2-0 down against them.
Feels
so
like
to score first, to take a lead into half time, and to be deservedly ahead, because they'd had some moments, and I remember Butland's making 1 or 2 decent stops.
Yeah, he had one very good save.
But they didn't deserve to be winning that game
from the rebound of it. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. But Jamie scores those goals. Was it Malmo? He scored a very similar goal. He is a player who follows the ball in, which is a good trait to have if you're a kind of attacking midfielder. Stroke, I don't actually know, number 10. I'm not entirely sure what position he does play for us these days, but it's a good trait to have, and probably something we should do more of. So, look, we've touched upon it, but let's just deal with them, and let's just deal with all 3 of Celtic's goals. And as you said, in the first half, Celtic did have some kind of snaps, kind of ball over the top, and was it Kyogo had a shot which was fairly easily saved by Butland in the end. But I think Butland made it look easy, to be fair. But Butland had one very, very good save when one of their players was through and he just dived at his feet and then got up and saved the kind of rebound shot. They had 2 very good saves there. But for their goals, I mean, first goal was a deflection. But at the same time, the ball's coming out to a guy unmarked on the edge of the box, the thing. The second goal is, what's the second one? The second one's the Balogun
header back to
Raskin. I mean, who's at fault there? I mean, is it Raskin that's at fault? Is it Balogun that's at fault? Both of them?
So it's funny, because I've seen on the agenda that we put together before the start of the show there, you've written, Balogun at fault for the goal.
I'd written Balogun mistake,
that.
and I actually meant to put a question mark against it because I wasn't
Right.
entirely sure who is it that's at fault there.
So for me, it's 80% Raskin, 20% back. Balogun was slightly switched off, and Balogun was slightly on his heels, and that's not like Balogun. Do you remember the tackle Leon Balogun made in the first half of that game today?
Yeah.
Where, and that's what he does. He's pacey, he's brave.
That's good timing.
And he's generally very measured and well judged in his actions. He switched off for a moment there, but actually the header back was so soft and it was so weak and it was selling him out that even I think if Balogun had been properly at the races and properly switched on, he's going into a challenge rather than taking the ball and distributing it. So Nico Raskin's been our best player of the last 6 weeks. And today you could make an argument to say he was at fault for the first 2 goals. He kind of it's him that causes the deflection.
He kind of turns his back on it a wee bit, doesn't he? Yeah.
And it's kind of a lazy leg that he sticks out to deflect it away. Robin Proper was there, would have got a block. Jack Butland probably would have saved it if nobody tried to block it. That being said, you're a midfielder. The shots come into your box. You're going to throw a leg at it to try and get a block on it. So that's fine. But for me, as good as he's been, he was at fault for the second goal for me.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure. I think Balogun, he definitely doesn't control it properly. But yeah, it wasn't the easiest to control. But there's still a bit to do for that lad. It's the blonde-haired, peroxide blonde-haired guy. There's still a bit to do, to be fair. But it's shooting yourself in the foot. It's so frustrating. And then the third goal, which I have to say, I thought was the winner. When I went in, I was deflated for, thankfully not for long. But I was deflated after that one. And again, we let them come down our left. That was clearly our weakness. Ridvan kind of dived in at the halfway line. It was a strange thing to do. Suddenly there's acres of space there. And as I said, I actually thought Proper had a good game. Proper and Tav had a good game. Butland had a good game.
Yeah.
But Jeffy, who had played well in the first half, I don't know. I think it was just fatigue in the second half. I think he was just done and was getting caught out. I'm not sure. Maybe Celtic changed their tactics, but all of the Celtics goals you felt were preventable. And I suppose you could say that about every goal, but you felt they were preventable. And that again is a recurring theme. And for all I understand why you're saying I felt worse after games, we still conceded 3 goals in 45 minutes. Having been 1 up and we should have been in control of the match. How do we get to that point? If we've literally had a 4-on-1, which you have to score. You just have to score. Then you cannot get chances in big games like that, in cup finals, a chance to go 2-0 up. And at 2-0, it's a very different game. 2-0, then suddenly that changes everything in that game. And to have that chance and not take it, and not even get the cut back across or the shot away or whatever the hell it was. He was, again, I've not really seen it back, but good pressing. Again, a bit like the first goal. Capitalising on a mistake, very very quick transition. You don't take it, and then the next thing you know, 10 minutes later, you're 2-1 down. And it's these mistakes. For all we're playing better, these mistakes have not been removed from our football yet. And it's little things that make a difference. It's just these little bits. And I don't know, what do you do? Is this just something that comes with time? Will they get the time? We'll maybe chat about that later. But in terms of the goals, Celtic's goals, all 3 goals, I've been pissed off about them. Am I wrong here? Do you feel I'm harsh on them? Do you feel these were, like sometimes you just concede goals, you have to accept, they were good goals? Or because I felt every one of them was preventable.
I agree. The third one was probably the one that actually annoyed me the most. Because take the second, whether it's Balogun or it's Raskin, goals happen where someone makes a mistake and it leads to a goal. And you can kind of just accept that. The third goal, and to a degree the first one, although it takes a deflection, it's a similar goal, it's a similar strike from a similar position. But the third goal, the boy has so much space in the centre between our goal sticks. He's got so much space. You could see it coming. That was what it was. You could, as soon as that ball started moving down our left-hand side, you could see it coming. And I feel like, particularly playing against them, we've seen it before. Yeah. We've seen that that ball come down the flank. It's usually, to be fair, it's usually down the other flank, and it's usually Tavernier. But we've seen the ball coming down the side. We've seen it be cut back. We've seen the boy in acres of space, sort of 15, 18 yards out. And that is really frustrating. That is really frustrating. The other two I can kind of rationalise a bit more. Big deflection and just a silly mistake. And that's, look, I hear what you're saying. It's difficult to be positive when you concede 3 goals in one half of football, when you throw away a winning position. They still... this isn't going to be a popular sentence. They still have better attackers than we have defenders. In my opinion,
I think that's an accurate. I mean, I think you have to be honest about these things. They are still. Ironically, it's players their manager inherited. I think, but I think they do. They have better players and more of them in their forward areas. Yeah,
and that so they bring on towards the end of the game. They bring on that Engels boy who they spent 11 million quid on.
Yeah.
That's the value of our squad, and a boy that they've brought off the bench.
Yeah.
So has to. I know it's a bit rich. A Rangers fan saying that when we'll go and play Dundee next week. Totally understand that, but we do still have to give that context. And I do still think all of these contextual parts, the part about us playing on Thursday night as opposed to on Tuesday night, they still factor into what's going on there. And that's kind of how I'm not justifying it, because it's not acceptable and it's not justifiable, but I can understand it a bit more.
Yeah.
The fatigue, the strength and depth, the refereeing decision or the VAR non-decision that I think has ultimately cost us today. All of these little things that are kind of differentiating today's result from some of the 3-0 earlier in the season, for example.
Yeah, we were just hammered. Yeah. Okay, let's stop talking about Celtic's goals. Diomande, we saw something that we do not see very often, Ross, as Rangers supporters. We saw a goal from a corner, which, considering how many corners Rangers get, and actually I think somebody sent me a link to something this week. Somebody had done some kind of analysis on Rangers corners, and it just was horrendous reading. The total ineptness of our corners. And I actually think that the opposition are more likely to score from one of our corners than we are. That we're far more likely to let them break down the other end of the park and score than we are to score. It's just bizarre how awful our corners are. However, today we got a goal from a corner, and it's quite a nice goal actually. I mean, it took a wee deflection, but a nice turn from Diomande, who I thought had a spell the last 20 minutes of the second half when he just suddenly took the game by the scruff of the neck, and he was suddenly everywhere. He was attacking, he was defending, he was winning the ball in midfield, he was crowding people out. He just suddenly found an extra gear when we needed it. He really drove us on when at a point when we were 2-1 down, and Celtic had a bit of pressure when we were 2-1 down, and it looked like we might just collapse. And we didn't, and I think some of that credit has to go to Diomande, because I thought actually he another player who maybe had a bit of criticism this season, but has looked pretty good the last few times he's played, and I had a good game today. But it was a nice goal, and then Danielo's goal, a striker's goal, a cross and a striker getting his head on it and burying it. The timing of it could not have been better. And I was delighted for Danilo, because he's a player who's had a hard time at Rangers. It's just not happened for him. He's been plagued by injury, some serious injuries in that, and he looks like he's fit. He's coming back. It's going to take him it's going to take a few weeks for him to get back to full fitness, certainly match fitness. But he's been getting some time. That's him started scoring goals for us as well. What would you take on those 2 goals? And they were fantastic. We were ecstatic again. It was like Thursday night for a short time.
Yeah, it was emotionally exhausting, let's say, that second half. Yeah, so the point about corners, our corners today, let alone this year, the corners today from both sides were embarrassing. I mean, absolutely abysmal.
Most of them didn't beat the first man.
So, no,
Thankfully in that there's no excuse for that.
No, absolutely not. Professional footballers, you have to be able to beat the first man. Thankfully, in the one that we scored, Diamondi kind of was the first man. So, it's genius. Yeah, it takes a bit of a deflection on the way through. I don't think the keeper was getting there.
I don't think so either,
to be honest. So, we'll take that. I've been talking about them scoring a lucky deflection goal, and we scored a deflection goal. But I think it's different. I don't think ours would have been saved. He had Diamondi, what was it, 90 seconds before that, had an extraordinary effort on goal.
That was a good save.
That made a decent save. And I would have loved to have seen that gone in. He's a good player. He is a good player. I think he has, he started last season, he was one of our better players. It possibly diminished a little bit towards the end of the season, and he's not had a great start this year. But he is kind of coming back into it. He's a talented footballer. He's still young. So yeah, very, very pleased for him. And then Danilo, I was overjoyed for him. Have you seen? I'm sure you've seen the videos of his dad at the games. And he was there again today. I was thrilled for him, and you could see what it meant to him. I think the first goal that he scored after his comeback from injury, it was like a sort of tap in from a couple of yards out, and that seemed to mean a lot to him. That today will have meant a great deal, and it was he does really. He's not a tall guy, is he? So he's done really well.
No, he did well. Got up there and he buried it. Absolutely buried it. Lovely cross. Actually, perfect cross. It was the kind of goal we don't score enough of. A ball in and a centre forward just getting his head on it and sticking it away. They were great. So look, I don't know how much you follow popular culture, Ross, but a blind man won the nation's biggest dancing programme this weekend. Man who is completely blind. He was taught to dance, and to dance live on television every week. It's a remarkable feat, and a big thing about it. What they were saying was that this should inspire anybody to let them know that no matter what, anything is possible. And I thought of that when I saw that penalty claim today. I thought, well, that's interesting, because they've obviously taken another blind man and put him in charge of VAR. And they've obviously decided if a blind man can win strictly, he can run VAR in Scotland, because it's an incredible decision. I get why the referee didn't give it. I'm not giving the referee a hard time for this. I can understand why the referee looked at that and thought, I don't know if that was in the box or not, but VAR, that's the whole point of bloody VAR. And I don't even like VAR, but I like it even less when they then don't, go in and say that's a clear and obvious error. That is in the box. That's a penalty. I mean, what gives there? Have they just bottled it? Have they just literally thought, you know what? It's either the guy's just totally inept, which is the only thing you can say. He's totally inept, completely unable to do his job, or else he's thought, I don't fancy my windows getting put in this weekend. I don't fancy 10 podcasts about how it's a Masonic conspiracy. I don't fancy being the subject of a documentary presented by Tom Boyd. So I'm just not giving it. Because what else could it be? Yeah.
And I thought something similar when Tom Boyd's face popped up on my screen this afternoon. And I said out loud, you're not making a refereeing documentary today, are you, Tom? It's really, really genuinely staggering, because this isn't a subjective call now. This isn't a question of was it a foul or was it not, and this is kind of really quite rare in the kind of VAR, the world of VAR controversy. The world of VAR controversy is usually, was it a foul or was it not? Was he offside or was he not? Was it a red card or was it a yellow card? Those are kind of the typical. Whereas even the offside one, there's not really any degree of nuance, or it should be pretty binary. It's not always binary, but it should be. This one is binary. This one was a foul. The referee blew his whistle and gave a foul, and I don't think anyone in the world is going to claim that it wasn't a foul. So it's a foul. Then it becomes a question of, is it a penalty or is it not? And now we can all kind of put to bed immediately the debate of whether it was in the box or whether it wasn't, because there's photographic evidence of him pulling his shirt and kind of it's Czerny, isn't it? So pulling Czerny's shirt.
Yes, Czerny gets fouled out.
And Czerny's foot is comfortably on the line, if not over the line, into the box, and he's kind of leaning that way anyway, so he's definitely being fouled in the box. Now, the foul starts outside of the box, and then it continues into the box. And I remember about 4 years ago on this show, Rangers gave away a podcast. Rangers gave away a penalty, where the foul started outside the box and it continued into the box. And I came on the podcast that evening and I said, it's a disgrace that we gave away a penalty for that they've given a penalty, because the foul started outside the box and therefore it's a free kick. And I got slaughtered in the comments and on social media and whatnot, going, if you're going to go on a podcast, know the rules. Actually, fair point. I looked at the rule and I went, it doesn't matter if it started outside the box. If the foul continues into the box, it is a penalty.
Yeah. Can I just point out, if people are looking for factual accuracy and an understanding of the rules, they are listening to the wrong podcast. Just if you're listening, this is just pure bias that we'll be giving you in this programme. If you're looking for subjectivity, objectivity, or the rules, I'm sure there are other podcasts you can tune into.
There are, but that was the one time in 6 years that I've made a bad comment. Everything else has been absolutely bulletproof. But it's the one time that I've had to learn a rule the hard way, because, quite frankly, I made an arse of it. So that's fine. Now I know that rule. So it is a foul. We've established that. The foul continues into the box, and the rules say that should be a penalty. So that brings us to, why did VAR not give that as a penalty? Option A, they forgot the rule, and they've gone, that foul started outside the box, or most of that foul took place outside of the box, therefore free kick, and they've just kind of got it wrong. I got it wrong, but I'm a bit of a clown and I'm not a qualified referee.
I'm not even job to get that decision right or wrong.
It's not my job to get that decision right or wrong. So that's very plausible. It's possible that they just got that rule wrong, both of them. That is the VAR and the assistant VAR. Option 2 is that they've not been shown it. Maybe they've not really seen it in the VAR room, that whatever feed, and I don't know, I presume they've got the kind of Premier Sports feeds or the TV feeds. Maybe they've got the other feed. I don't know how it works, but you sort of see it on Match of the Day or whatever, and they do have quite a few different screens. So I presume they've got a few feeds going on, a few different angles all at the same time. Maybe they've just not seen it. If that's the case, VAR's not fit for purpose.
No.
If they're able
just
to,
no point in having it then.
There's no point in having it. The third is the concerning one of going, this could be controversial if we give this. We better not give it. Although it's a penalty, people might not understand why it's a penalty, and it's a cup final, and we don't want to be giving a controversial penalty in a cup final, an Old Firm Cup final, which could well decide the fate of the trophy. Therefore, we better not. Now, I don't know. Clearly, of the three options, that's the worst one. That's like scandalous, genuinely scandalous. I don't know which of those three options is most likely. I don't know which of those three options is most likely. I think it's probably, you'd like to think, as a rational football fan, you'd like to think the most likely thing is that they've somehow made a mistake, whether they've made a mistake with their knowledge and interpretation of the law, or they've made a mistake in terms of the operation and what they've seen, and they've just not been shown that angle. No one's given the replay. Now, what's come out and made this a little bit more concerning is, I understand the VAR told John Beaton there's no need to review that. So, how have they come to that decision?
Yeah.
How have they come to that decision?
Yeah.
It's staggering, and unfortunately, again, look, we'll never be able to prove this because we can't go back and correct the timeline. We get that penalty, we score that penalty, we win the cup.
I think
in
so.
My mind.
At that point in the game, yeah.
So,
it's a very, very. I mean, and you have to say, if that decision had gone the other way, oh bloody hell, we would never hear the end of it. I mean, that would
Government
just
summits,
be...
all
Oh,
sorts.
absolutely. There's First Minister's questions tomorrow. I mean, there's guys writing to the UN. That we're never hearing the end of that. And it's a terrible decision. It's just... I'd like to say, it's a baffling decision.
Yeah.
In this day and age with the technology. And with some of the stuff you see, you're thinking... I like to say, I don't know. You have to say, you just hope the guy isn't cheating. So, he's down to either being really bad at his job, or just, like you say, just didn't fancy giving that decision at that point in that game.
This is a cup final, right? This is a cup final. Two teams that despise each other, two very passionate sets of fans. This is a decision that needs an explanation. We need to know why, because our confidence now in the VAR system, in refereeing in general, for me, it's gone.
Yeah.
If you can look at something that should not be subjective, it should be binary, and yet everyone can see what the answer is, and yet they've said you don't need to review this. This doesn't need a review. We need to know why. We need to know how they've come to that decision. And the SFA or the SPFL or whoever's in charge of this competition, I guess the SPFL, needs to my mind, offer us an explanation.
Yeah.
Now, there's going to be, and I know that, to be honest, we don't particularly want to get into this, of what should Rangers do? Should Rangers come out with statements and do this and fight and whatever? Last time we did that, it was against Willie Collum, who's now in charge of refereeing. So it doesn't fill you with optimism. But this is simply now not fair. Referees are there to enforce the laws of the game. The law of the game hasn't been enforced there in what, in my mind, is a kind of tournament-defining moment. It needs to be explained.
Yeah, because it's, like you say, it's not like a handball where there's this, it's one of the handballs, one of these ones where it does, short of someone literally lifting up and grabbing it, it is something that does feel more subjective. This isn't subjective. He's in the box. It's just it's clear as day when you see the images. He's in the box. That's a penalty. There's nobody's debating that he wasn't being fouled. The foul was given. It's just a question then of was it given in the right place, and it wasn't. I mean, that aside, how did you feel the referee's performance? There was a couple of fairly soft bookings. I thought Jeffrey's booking was very soft. I thought a couple of times he gave bookings when it's just a free kick. It's a cup final. It's a free kick. It's no more than that. Beyond that, did you have any question marks over the refereeing?
I thought there were some inconsistencies, let's say, with the refereeing. I felt that there were some times when, there was a Hadji got booked for sort of stopping them on a quick break 2 minutes before. We'd been stopped on a quick break, but we went and won the corner, but then it didn't come back for a yellow. Yeah. There were a couple of inconsistencies, let's say. I think he kind of bought into Celtic are very good at, when they're in a position, say a defender's on the ball in their own defending their own box, they feel like any contact at all.
A couple of times.
They had that every time. Desser's booking, when he sort of came on and he went, let's say, full-blooded into Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think it was a soft booking. I think Carter-Vickers made a big display of how much he'd been hit. I think
a nasty challenge, said Neil Lennon.
Yeah. Yes.
Right away, that it's utter nonsense.
Yeah. So, look, for me, the referee could have been flawless throughout that game, up until the moment of the non-penalty, and at that point, all the credibility for the officiating is gone. Yeah,
I agree. Extra time, not a lot to note in extra time, as we talked about earlier. Certainly the second period of extra time, I think our legs had gone. We just kept giving them the ball. We just couldn't. Even when we would win it, we would just give it straight back to them. We had lost the ability to hold it up. I was a bit frustrated. At that point, Dowell had come on, Barron had come on, Dessers had come on. They're all fresh legs. Sterling's on, but he's playing centre half. So you're not expecting him to burst up the park. But Dowell, I don't really know why I mean, you look at that and you think, surely there's a boy in the youth team that you'd better sticking on the dowel because he contributes nothing. And Desser's definitely weakened us up front. Other than, getting booked, I don't really think he touched the ball. He really wasn't involved in much, which was a shame because I kind of hoped that, we came on. I thought, I wonder, is this the redemption arc? Is he going to come on and score the winner in the cup final for us? After the difficulties he's had, but no, it wasn't to be. So extra time, as I said, there wasn't a lot of note in extra time. It passed off. Nothing like the kind of Harem pace of the 90, and then the penalties come. Can you criticise a player for not scoring a penalty? Didn't miss it; it was saved. Can you criticise a player for not? I mean, I criticised him at the time. I have to say, called him some fairly unpleasant things at the time. But okay, a few hours later, everyone says penalties are a lottery. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if penalties are. I get that the pressure. I get that that there's pressure in it, but bloody hell. You should score a penalty every. A professional football player should score a penalty every single time, as far as I'm concerned. He gets to hit it, a free hit. Is it unfair of me to be critical of Yilmaz? He stepped up. He took the responsibility. He was clearly devastated afterwards, as he would be. It wasn't a bad penalty. It was a good save. It wasn't a great penalty. It wasn't a terrible penalty. But I don't know. I'm help me here. I'm mumbling and stumbling as I try not to just vent my spleen against him because I think I'm probably being unfair.
Well, there's a couple of things to my mind. It wasn't a great penalty. It wasn't a poor penalty either, though. It was a decent save. It was an okay penalty. It wasn't the worst penalty. Both Rangers and Celtic scored some excellent penalties, and both Rangers and Celtic scored at least one sort of fortunate penalty where the keeper goes the other way. It's the easiest save of his life.
Yeah.
Penalties are penalties a lottery. I remember saying that in a group chat once when I think it was we lost probably the Europa League final. Penalties are a lottery, and someone pointed out penalties are the only part of this sport that you can practice time and time and time and time again in identical conditions. So it's not really a lottery. You should know exactly what you're going to do, and you should execute it.
Yeah.
I think it's tough for him. Ridvan was clearly heartbroken. I actually didn't think he had a great game. Jeff Day, as you say, his legs went in the second half. I don't think Ridvan improved us particularly. I think he was.
I think Jeff Day's our best left back. He's our first choice left back when both are fit. They both played well on Thursday.
Agreed.
They both didn't play as well today. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's there's not. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't sort of help you because I'm going to stumble my way through this as well. There's not a great deal to say about it. It was an okay penalty. The keeper went the right way. He gave himself a good chance to save it. Unfortunately, most of Celtic's penalties were very, very good, and there wasn't a lot Jack Butland could have done. There were one or two. Was it? Really remember which one? No. One or two that could have been saved if Butland guesses the right way. That was it. But Kasper Schmeichel, what a wee fud! All that, just. You could tell a deeply unlikable person the way he's trying to put this. I know it's all part of the game and whatnot, but I'd rather have our guy than their guy. Particularly when our guy then steps up and. What did you make of that? That I have to say was a bit of a surprise. That Butland was taking our last penalty. I was absolutely astounded. But then I went, actually, who else do I want taking it? Because who we had? Well, I assumed Dessers was going to take it. Who would you actually genuinely rather have take that penalty? Butland or Dessers. Me too. But but I assumed Dessers was going to take it. Dessers was taking penalties. He's taking. He's a centre forward. I assumed that Dessers was going to take the last penalty. I did as well. When Tav took the first one, I thought, well, Dessers was obviously lined up for the last one, and then he was going to take the ones in between. But I assumed that Dessers would take it. But then I don't know that I wanted him taking it. Certainly not in his kind of form at the moment. I think he's a confidence player. I wouldn't have had confidence in him
No, I
stepping up
get
to
that.
take
I
that.
get that. And listen,
And then
Butland buried it. It was a cracking penalty. It was just,
it was a cracking
it was
penalty.
just a surprise.
Yeah, yeah. But so who else you going? Kieran Dowell? No. Connor Barron?
No,
I've seen him take shots. Don't want him trying it.
no.
It's
Yeah,
what
Raskin.
Dujon Sterling.
Then you're into centre halves and people like that. Yeah.
Oh, but look, it was a penalty shootout. We scored 4 out of 5. They saved 1. It's a heartbreaker. It's an absolute heartbreaker. But it's that's not all to say.
Is there any positives we can take from that game?
Right, here's what I do my best. Yes,
just where the therapy kicks in now, Ross, is it? Because Frankie says, Frankie literally said to me, "You'll feel better for talking about it." And I said to him, "I don't want to do this, Frankie. I don't want to go on your bloody stupid podcast and talk about us losing the bloody cup final on penalties 2 hours after it happened. Why are you making me do this? I don't want to do it." I was like a 5-year-old stamping my feet in the corner. And Frankie said to me, "You'll feel better for talking about it."
Right. No, I'll do my best to try and make you feel better. There are positives. I mean, you look at the progress that we've made in the last 6 weeks. There's been a lot of talk in media about this game was going to be the litmus test to see if Rangers have turned a corner. Now, I hate that expression. I'll tell a wee story about why I hate that expression. From 2014 to 2016, I worked in the civil service and I sat next to a Man United fan. And that was the period immediately after Sir Alex Ferguson into Davy Moyes and then everything that kind of followed there. And over the course of that 2-year period, I think he told me that Man United have turned a corner 8 or 9 different times. Football is not that instant. Football doesn't change that quickly. Rangers are on a journey. Rangers are in a process. I think every Rangers fan said when Philippe Clement was appointed, there's going to be a rebuild. We need to give him a few windows. That doesn't change. It's hard. It's really, really hard to go through that process and go through that journey. But it's not as simple as turning a corner. So why are there positives that come from today? Well, firstly, the result over 90 minutes is considerably better than where we have been facing Celtic over the last few times, with the exception, obviously, of the other 3-all draw, with Rabbi Matondo's late goal and whatnot. Yeah. It was, generally speaking, a better performance against them than we have seen. So I was at the Scottish Cup final back in May when we lost that 1-0, where I felt we sort of matched them in midfield. But today I thought we were better. I actually felt, whilst they have the better players, I thought a lot of times we looked better than them, or we played better football than them, or we had better ideas than them.
We had 19 shots, 8 on target.
Right.
Celtic had 10 shots, 7 on target.
Yeah. It just, one of those, a bit like Tottenham as well, you just have a feel that we had that game.
Yeah.
And I think what's so frustrating, and it's not the first time that we say this, is that we would have won that game but for individual errors. So it would have been, I guess, for the third goal, I guess it was Yilmaz that kind of overcommitted himself down the left-hand side and left himself totally exposed and out of position. Or for the second goal, you've got Raskin's header back to Balogun. Individual errors cost us time and time and time again, and they don't cost them as much. And of course, the refereeing thing, I think, has had a massive impact on it. The extra 48 hours of rest, I think, had a massive impact on it. So for all of those things to come together and to get to penalties in that game, I do think it's progress. I think it's improvement. And I think you look at the squad today, a squad that is younger than it was 6 months ago, a squad that is quantifiably cheaper in terms of outgoing salaries than it was 6 months ago. A squad that's finally getting people back from long-term injuries or long-term absences. We're stronger than we were. We set up right tactically. The manager knew what he was doing today. The manager had a plan to go and win that game. And if it weren't for those things that were kind of out of his control and out of the club's control, we would have won that game. So I believe there are positives. I don't want that to be interpreted as I'm happy with that result or I can accept that result. It is bitter. It is extremely, extremely bitter and hurtful and heartbreaking again to watch them win a trophy. But when you put a kind of long-term view on it, considering that 6 weeks ago, 80%, 90% of our fan base wanted the manager gone, you look at how that's slowly kind of improving. I'm not going to say turned around or turned a corner. We're starting to see what this could develop into. There is still, I mean, some of it, they're young, they're inconsistent, they're mercurial, they come in and out of games. But when you look at a spine of a team, Hamza Egeman, Nico Raskin, Mo Diamondi, Yanis Hadji, maybe not Hadji for you, Cherny and Bayrami, Jeffy, he's still very young. Yeah. Baron Jeffy, there's something there. There is something there. And give it another couple of windows. I don't know that we'll do much in January, to be honest, but give it another couple of windows. And I've seen enough today to believe that we can challenge. Not this year. This year's a write-off. I think that's clear. But I do think that there is enough sign for me that we can challenge.
It's interesting you talked about Clement there, because you like me, you must know people who would have got rid of Clement a few weeks ago, who had decided that this is not happening. You're not the man. You can't. The team's not playing well. Individual players have regressed. Question mark. So I mean, actually, Egamani was a player who people were scratching their heads, wondering why did we sign this guy. And Clement kept making excuses about it's a young team, it's a new team. You got to give them time. And that's one thing you don't get at Rangers. No matter what, you don't get time. Those last two games, I mean, it's more than that, because to be fair, the last 4 games or so have been fairly impressive. But those last 2 games, the Spurs game and the Celtic game, were the kind of games that could have seen the manager lose his job. A heavy defeat against Spurs, beforehand was, I mean, I see they absolutely hammered somebody today. A heavy defeat against Spurs could have looked on the cards at one time. And very, very few people were going into that game today with any sense of confidence just a couple of weeks ago. So do you think he's done enough to silence the naysayers? Do you think you said that, has he bought himself time? We've got Dundee next Saturday at home, and then I think it's Motherwell and St Mirren. And then I can't remember if there's another game before we play Celtic. So, we get Celtic at Ibrox in a couple of weeks, 10 days, we'll have a couple of weeks' time, which will be different again. It'll be interesting to see how the team responds from this. If as we are trying to do, if they can take any positives from it, if it gives them any belief or whether that's just gutted them, and it'll take them weeks to get over the disappointment. I don't know. There's no game midweek. There's no game midweek, so I think the next game's Dundee. So that's good. Chance to give players some players a rest, etc. I think we can take some. I mean, as I said, I'm really not feeling up to it, but Tav has definitely found form again. He looks like the player that he was 2 seasons ago. He now is back. He defended very, very well today. He attacked very well against Spurs. He looked like the player we used to know. I think Proper has come through the last 2 games and actually looked like quiet games. Games where you didn't really notice him, and then you realised actually he's had a pretty decent game. Nothing's really get past him. He's done the easy thing. He's picked up his man. He's won the balls he had to win. I think he's suddenly looked good. Raskin is like a new signing. From a player who looked really good when he first came into the club, and then seemed to struggle when a fellow Belgian took over, which it surprised me. He didn't do much last season under Clement. Barely featured in this season. I know he's had injuries, and I saw that with an interesting comment about he changed his diet. I know he said we've given our single players we're giving our single players some cookery lessons so they can lose weight. I thought that's probably why they're single. You know, they have to lose all that weight. You know, he'll get himself a bird now. Well done, big Phil. But you know, Raskin is he's looking really good. Cherney I think has now pretty much established himself as a first choice as well. And I think more than that, there is a style to how we're playing now. You know, I think you now see a style. It will be interesting against Dundee. Dundee will come and they'll look to frustrate. It'll be a very different type of game. They're not going to be expansive. They're not coming to Ibrox to try and win. They're just coming to try not to lose, which isn't to say they won't win, but it'll be very different. So it'll be interesting to see how that works, because that ultimately are the games he struggled in as well, and be interesting to see if there's something they can do on that. I suppose we should talk about, with leaving the game today, I suppose we should just talk about the fact we appointed a new chairman yesterday. Yes. Which, again, is something the club has been criticised about, the speed or otherwise of making important appointments. But somebody was appointed yesterday. I can't claim to know him. I can't claim to give you any insight into the man beyond what I've read in the papers. Clearly has a extensive business background. He's a Rangers supporter, which I still think is important for that position. Still looking for us to be run by people who actually support the club. But I mean, it must be pleasing, I think, to start to see these positions being filled, Ross. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been too much instability, and actually, I think that we are too. I was going to say that we're too focused on what's going on at boardroom level or who's in these roles, but that's not the right way. It's more that what's been going on at boardroom levels or the lack of people in those roles have drawn too much attention. Yeah. You know, we are naturally interested in the fact because it keeps kind of happening. Since the removal of the SPIVs in 2015, whatever that was, 2016, kind of. 2015. Since then, we've had Paul Murray, we've had Dave King, we've had Park, we've had Bennett, we've had Gilligan, and now we've got the new chap. Like, we are rattling through chairman at a rate of knots. Chief executive of the MD, we had Stuart Robertson for a number of years, who people felt, rightly or wrongly, he was too soft. We then had Bisgrove, who was too shiny, and
he was very shiny.
He was extremely shiny. And then obviously he's kind of quickly uprooted himself and gone over to Saudi, and in my opinion, left us in a really, really difficult position. What I do wish, and it's a slightly personal gripe of mine, is that I do wish that people who complain about what the chairman has done or what the chief executive has done, I wish they would educate themselves a little bit more on what those roles actually are, particularly with the chair. The chairman's role.
Most folk have no idea what the chairman is. Yeah.
It's not day to day.
It's not an executive position.
I suspect it's non-executive. It's not paid. I've seen some comments of going, "How can we afford a chairman and a chief exec?" You go, in fact, if you don't know the answer to that, then I'm not sure you have the right to criticise what the chairman or the chief exec are doing, because you don't know what they should be doing. That being said, I suspect over the last 6 months or so, the chairman has been day to day because of the departure.
Because of lack of a CEO, yeah.
So now those positions are filled as of tomorrow, I guess. The chairman and the chief exec take those roles. The chairman, it should just be holding everyone else to account. So I don't really want to hear from the chairman. I don't really want to hear from the chief executive, quite frankly. We shouldn't need to. Things should be running smoothly. Forgive me if this is a bit of a blunt example, but who's the chief executive of Coca-Cola? Who's the chairman of WH Smith's? I've got no idea. Businesses that I use all the time don't know who their chief exec or their chairman are, because it shouldn't matter. Obviously, a slightly different dynamic in Rangers, but I do long for, and again, I don't mean this, I long for a time when we stop caring about who the chairman and the chief exec are. That will never happen given Rangers history. But I long for the day that those activities stop demanding so much of our attention.
Yeah. I've been following Rangers a long time, and the simple truth is that for a good percentage, I wouldn't like to put a number on, but a very high percentage of our support, they only care who the directors and the chairman are when we're not winning. You know, and we're looking for somebody to make a change, to do something to make it start winning again. When Rangers are winning, you know, you saw that yourself anyway. I appreciate you're significantly younger than me, Ross, but you know, throughout the David Murray years, because we're winning, most folk were willing to turn a blind eye to whatever was happening in a director's box. When we're not winning, everybody's an expert. But either way, I think this is it is good to start to see these positions getting filled. It is good to start to see that you know, and these things do take time. You know, I don't care what anyone says. You cannot just go and, you know, you don't just go out into the Cobham Road and whistle for the next chairman of Rangers. You know, that person has to be vetted. That person has to be somebody that is the right fit for the board that's there, and is the right fit for whatever the vision that the board have. And you know, that if it takes an extra few months to get the right person, it's worth doing that. You know, you're going to get criticised for it, but you're going to get criticised for it either way. You'll get plenty of criticism if you appoint the wrong person. Anyway, look, I don't know if this has been helpful or not. I don't know if Frankie was just talking nonsense. But anyway, we've done it. We've made it through. We've done I think we've done slightly more than an hour. So Ross, thanks for your time tonight. I think you and I are on again in the 27th. I was looking through there for some reason, and you've clearly been bad this Christmas, because I think you're back on with me again on the 27th. But there will be a podcast next week, and on Friday there will be a preview of the Dundee game. Craig and Scott, I believe, will be on that. And remember that it's not just on YouTube. Of course, you can find us on Acast, iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify, and of course YouTube. If you want to find Gersnet on Twitter or X, you do that, and Frankie kind of keeps you up to date with when the next show will be on and who will be on it. Ross, as I said, thanks for joining me tonight, and I think we'll let everybody get back on with their morning for now. Good night.
Absolutely.